Hello everyone, this is the Gaming Cat here, and if you know me, you already know how much I love Starcraft. Even if you've only seen my YouTube poofs, you still can probably tell how close this series is to my heart. My memories of it go all the way back to watching my dad play when I was just 4 or 5, and I've always been enraptured by the deep gameplay and incredible universe. It was such a part of my childhood that I can't imagine growing up without it. The release of Starcraft II: Wings of Liberty was one of the most exciting days of my life, and it went on to become my favorite game of all time. I cannot tell you how important this game is to me, and how much I've grown to further appreciate the amount of work and effort that has been put into this series over the years. Of course, not everyone shares my opinion, which is to be expected. No game is for everyone. But there are an unfortunate number of people, typically on the forums, who love to constantly remind the world that Starcraft II ruined the series and how the story isn't dark anymore and that the graphics are too silly and that the gameplay is way too simple and streamlined and that Blizzard has just run the whole series into the ground! They just care about their money and nothing else! You shameless whores! Please stay out of this. Anyway, it's absolutely bizarre to me how much hatred Starcraft II has gotten ever since day one from former fans, particularly those on the Blizzard forums. Seriously, it seems that every time someone uploads a video even related to Starcraft 1 or 2, there's at least half a dozen comments talking about how terrible it is or how Blizzard has lost their touch over the years. It's been over 6 years now and the final expansion has been released, and people are still complaining about it. And the worst part is that all these years, I felt strangely alone on it. I mean, I'm willing to defend games like Dead Rising and Minecraft, both games that have plenty of defenders ready to provide their own arguments, but I've rarely seen fellow fans really dedicate themselves to making counter-arguments as to why they love this game, and certainly not as many as the amount of people constantly giving it a hard time. So I've decided to finally stand up for this game, and give my own arguments as to why I don't think it deserves all the hatred it gets. This video isn't going to be incredibly long, but I want to make sure I explain my side as thoroughly as I possibly can. I don't want to just pull a Sammy Classic Sonic fan and scream, "Like Starcraft, like Starcraft, like Starcraft, like Starcraft, like Starcraft!" I want to make sure that people understand where I'm coming from, and to present myself in a way where even those who disagree can still seriously consider what I have to say. Then why do you have me appear in the videos as a caricature of the haters if you want to appear respectful, you moron? Yeah, it just felt like it. Anyway, the way this is going to work is that I'm going to go over every major feature of Starcraft II that's been blasted before, compared to the original Starcraft, and explain why I think not only does it stand well against its predecessor, but also even surpasses it. I'm going to avoid talking about the multiplayer here, since I don't play multiplayer all that much. This is going to be about what I know and what I believe it did well. That said, however, I always try to be fair in my videos. So out of fairness, I'm going to take a moment to discuss the one thing that I agree the original Starcraft did better than Starcraft II, the sound design. Starcraft 1 always had a really good soundtrack, and I was honestly able to recall what it sounded like even after my first few plays of it. Every part of each song was unique in some way, and people are still creating tributes to it to this day. Starcraft 2's soundtrack, for some reason, just wasn't as memorable. There are still some really good parts of each song, and the songs themselves can still be pretty good, particularly the Terran themes. But the Zerg and Protoss songs are just somehow more forgettable. And no, I'm not just saying that because I'm a Terran player, because even with how little I played the Zerg and Protoss back in the Starcraft 1 days, I could still remember their themes very well. It took until Legacy of the Void for the Protoss to finally start getting some great music, and I still couldn't tell you what the Zerg music sounds like. The difference isn't as noticeable as, say, The Binding of Isaac and Rebirth, where some of the music from the second game was downright grating, but it's still there. It also extends to the very sound effects. Though some of them are still good, such as the Zealot and Battlecruiser attacks, a lot of others just don't have the same punch as the old ones. Just take a listen. Unit quotes suffer from this as well. Again, there are still some really good ones, such as the Zealot, which sounds more like a religious warrior and less like an orc ripoff now, but when they aren't as good, it really shows. The Zergling just doesn't have the same ferocity behind it, and the Goliath sounds so bored compared to the original. And the Ghost, who sounded tough and confident in the original... Somebody call for an exterminator? just sounds constipated now.
Ghost reporting. Give me the sit rep.
Dropping the payload.
Overall, while some parts still hold up, some of the sounds just aren't as good as they were in the original. Props to Blizzard for allowing us to listen to the original soundtrack in-game, though. Now that that's out of the way, let's move on to the first thing StarCraft II did better, the gameplay. It's a difficult question to pose as to how you can improve the gameplay of the original StarCraft while preventing it from deviating too much, but Blizzard definitely succeeded. For one thing, they took away the 12-unit selection limit, which made commanding large armies much easier. You now only have to switch from hotkey to hotkey to select different types of units and manage their skills easier, instead of having to switch in order to do both that and manage a sizable force at the same time. Because of how large the armies of StarCraft can get, this streamlines the gameplay in a way that is smart and makes sense. Another good change they made was improving the unit pathing, which was sorely needed. Rather than just heading directly to the spot you pinpointed, units used to go in odd zigzag patterns, which wasn't as fast and would even lead to them moving into the enemy's range too early. This was also the cause of some really bad pathfinding, where if a single unit was in the way of another one, it would turn another direction and try to get to the spot you ordered it to move in a path that went totally out of the way. This was most infamous with the Dragoons pathfinding, where it would instantly head in the completely opposite direction if it so much as nudged another unit. The battle is over there, jackhole! Thanks to the new programming, you don't need to constantly worry about what your units are up to when you give them a move order anymore. You can just click and wait without needing to keep micromanaging them when you shouldn't have to. Most of the complaints I've seen towards the gameplay say that streamlining it made it too simple, and that the first StarCraft's gameplay is superior because it was easy to learn, hard to master. I'm all for that type of gameplay, but it needs to be that kind of game where the difficulty lies in the player's capacity to overcome challenge, not the game's inferior gameplay. Though it does take skill to manage certain amounts of units under limited hotkeys, I'd argue that it takes just as much skill to manage larger armies of units while still having room to hotkey your production buildings and whatnot. Besides, I started playing to fantasize about being an intergalactic commander, not an intergalactic babysitter. The next thing I'd like to talk about is one that might not seem that significant, but I thought was done very well, the graphics. Given how StarCraft 1 and 2 were more than 10 years apart from each other, the task of bringing the graphics through that much time of technological advancement while still allowing it to keep its feel and style seems pretty daunting. Thankfully, they managed to pull it off beautifully. Units that were once just clusters of pixels are now fully fleshed out in 3D polygons, and the maps are even more detailed now. I really like this because I've always wanted to see what the units of the StarCraft world completely looked like, but given how limited the graphics of the old days were, it was pretty hard. This step up in visuals helps bring even more life into the game's world, and battles look even cooler now. This is also true for the unit portraits, which now look better and have even more animation. Quite a step up from the days when Jim Raynor's head looked like an egg and Kerrigan looked like a monkey. And do I even need to talk about the FMVs? Just look at this! Yeah, this is definitely a step up from back when— what's wrong with your face?! Strangely enough, even this has people who say StarCraft 1 did this better. Even stranger is the one consistent thing I've heard people say about it. They said that the reason why StarCraft 2's graphics are inferior is that Blizzard went out of their way to make them look cartoony, which doesn't suit the world. So, let me get this straight. Cartoony, realistic. Cartoony, realistic. Cartoony, realistic. This is such an odd criticism that I'm honestly not sure how to respond. The closest I've ever come to figuring this one out is that perhaps they're referring to how when you zoom the camera in closely, it becomes easier to see the rougher and less detailed spots of the polygons that make up the units. But that's honestly more caused by the fact that the graphics need to be limited somewhat to run a game with this many different things going on at once, rather than Blizzard trying to make it look cartoony. And even then, if you're zoomed in this closely, are you even playing the darn game at this point? You don't read books with the pages pressed against your face, and you don't play an RTS game when you can only view 4 Marines at a time. Let's move on to something that I can debate the improvement of easier, the world building. In Starcraft 1 it was certainly more subtle, but it was also a lot more minimal because of how little time they spent on it compared to making the game itself stand apart from other RTS games at the time. Most of the world building was done in the game's manual rather than the game itself, which wasn't as effective, especially if you didn't have the manual. Starcraft II took the aspect of building the Starcraft universe and pushed it way further. A lot of how the world works is finally shown in the campaign, from what the creation of an Archon looks like on the battlefield to how Marines put their combat suits on the barracks. We see what the inside of a battlecruiser looks like, what a Zerg attack looks like up close and personal, how Zealots fight side by side, all sorts of amazing things that couldn't have been shown back in the old days. A common criticism I've seen is that this takes away a lot of the ambiguity from the StarCraft universe and makes it less fun. And in one way, I can kinda see where people are coming from with that. A lot of fun with certain fiction is taking the small parts of what's been established and building your own conclusions from what you've been given. It allows the world to feel more special and personal in that sense. However, not all fiction has to be like that. At the end of the day, this is still the work of other people who love and care about the story they've been telling even more than we do. Continuing to build the world even more and flesh out all sorts of cool information only goes to show how much love they've put into what they've created. So what if it isn't as ambiguous? There's some pretty cool stuff in here. The next thing I'd like to talk about, and this is, in my opinion, the biggest improvement the second game made, the missions. I'm going to tell you all a deep, dark secret about me. I've never actually beaten the original StarCraft or Brood War myself. Oh my god! Yep, in spite of those games being a big part of my childhood, I've never actually beaten them. Why? Because the campaigns get so boring after a while. In case you haven't actually played the campaigns for yourself, let me give you an idea of what they're like. Protoss Mission 1, you regroup with your forces at a base, build them up more, and then plow through a nearby Zerg base. Protoss Mission 2, you wait for more forces to show up, then plow your way through a Zerg base to get to a Cerebrit. Protoss Mission 3, you plow through 2 Zerg bases just for the heck of it, as shown after. Protoss Mission 5, you plow through another base on an island. Protoss Mission 7, you plow through a couple bases for no good reason. Protoss Mission 8, you plow through more bases to make up for that reason. Protoss Mission 9, you plow through more Zerg bases and kill more Cerebrits. And this is just one campaign, too. The missions start out as fun enough, but then they just feel more and more repetitive as they just turn to cycles of plowing through more and more bases. And while I do love plowing things, some more than others, variety helps keep things interesting, and these missions badly needed variety. That kind of variety is what we get with the missions in Starcraft II, which have far more diverse objectives and a lot more ways of going about them. Of course, we've still got missions based around plowing through enemy bases, but we've also got a mission where you take down trains, a mission where you try to aid Kerrigan in a wizard duel, a mission where you witness 2 Protoss warlords battle for dominance, a mission where you hijack the biggest news station across the Terran worlds, a mission where you slowly infest an entire Protoss ship, and much, much more. There's even missions that are done in the style of dungeon crawlers like Diablo, as well as an escort mission that, shock of all shocks, doesn't suck. People have complained that Blizzard made the missions too easy and unchallenging, but let's face it, when you take away how monotonous the missions in the original games got, they're really not that hard. The AI only seems to throw a set number of units at a time at you, and once you know how to prepare for what it has, there's really not a lot it can do to prevent you from building up a sizable force and taking them down. The AI in StarCraft II has been improved a lot and gives you a much greater challenge. Even if you still find it too easy, a cool improvement that was made was difficulty levels, so you could give yourself a new challenge if you found the going too smooth for your liking. And even if you still found it too easy after going through all the missions on brutal difficulty and getting all optional objectives, congratulations! You're just really good at RTS games. Games don't present the same kind of challenge to every single person out there, so who's to say it isn't really difficult to some people, including me? And before you ask, I've beaten Dark Souls, Bayonetta 1 and 2, Hotline Miami, Max Payne 3 on Hard Mode, Doom 1 and 2 on Nightmare Mode, and Castlevania 1, 4, and 3. I found Starcraft II to be pretty challenging on Hard Mode. Even if the objectives are different from what the normal game is really like, it managed to bring in these objectives in a fun and engaging way, while still requiring plenty of strategy, hard work, determination, and sweat. But mostly sweat. The final point I've saved for last because it's probably going to be the most controversial: the storytelling. StarCraft 1 had a neat story, but it wasn't exactly told in the most organic way. Before every mission, there would be a sequence where the characters had a long conversation with each other in what was literally a talking head sequence before you finally got to the mission. There would once in a blue moon be an FMV that actually related to the story, but worst of all was the parts that would literally stop the game just to have the characters talk for a bit, and these were especially long in Brood War. Though the story itself was still neat if you could get past how clunky it was delivered, yeah, it was still delivered pretty clunkily. Because of how advanced Starcraft II was, the storytelling was majorly improved. The mission prologues were replaced with interludes where you'd be on the commander's main base of operations, whether it be the Hyperion, Leviathan, or Spear of Adun. During this time, you could actually go around and learn more about the characters you've met by talking with them yourself. This was really cool because of how much it expanded upon both them and everything that was going on. They always had something to say about the mission you were just on, as well as what was probably coming. The characters that once would have only been able to get their times to shine between missions in the original game now get more screen time in both the hub areas and the missions themselves. Not only does this give them more opportunities for their personalities to shine through, but also more time for them to become truly memorable characters. However, this does bring me to probably the biggest complaint about the entire game, that it isn't dark enough. Of all the complaints I've heard before, the biggest one always seems to be that Starcraft II has become too lighthearted and silly, that there's no longer any weight to what goes on because of how much edge the story has lost, and that the original was much more true to the series because it was dark and edgy and super duper serial, you guys!
Spoiler alert!
It wasn't. StarCraft was about space rednecks fighting insectoid aliens and extraterrestrial Jedi Knights, and it's always been about staying true to its space opera roots. It's always been pretty silly if you look at it a certain way, and it was never meant to be taken too seriously. What I love about Blizzard is that they've always had a fun sense of humor about their games, and know not to make things too grim or dire. Besides, the story can still be pretty dang dark at times, exploring elements such as post-traumatic stress disorder, the annihilation of an entire species, and plenty more messed up stuff as well, particularly involving Kerrigan. But even ignoring all of this, did StarCraft's story really need to be darker than it was? Just because something has a certain mood to it, that doesn't make it automatically good. The wonderful thing about the writing staff of Blizzard is that they've always wanted to have fun with what they've done, and there's clearly a lot of love and life in what they've made as a result. I don't want to see something grim and edgy if it's only there to look grim and edgy. I want to experience a story that was made with real motivation behind it. And that's not to say a story can't be dark and still have a lot of life and emotion in it. But a dark story won't fix everything automatically, and you need to focus on making it engaging first. As for all the individual nitpicks everyone has made about it, I'm not going to go over them here as there are far too many. Blizzard has already addressed most of them on the website, so go check that out if you're curious. So that's what I think about StarCraft II compared to the original one. By this point you may be wondering, if all of that is true, why does it still get so much hatred, especially when it first came out? Well, remember the episode I Hate Everything made about hype culture? How people getting excited and building something up too much will inevitably create huge amounts of disappointment when the final product doesn't live up to their incredibly high expectations?
And the thing is, it's always my own fault. Well, at least mostly my fault. I used to always read reviews, watch early videos and behind the scenes footage of whatever the hell it was, which is all content specifically designed to get you excited.
I think that's what happened with StarCraft II. Bear in mind, this is a game that was originally conceived nearly 12 years before its release. That's a lot of time for people to start getting their hopes up for something to match their exact expectations. Because so much time passed and so little detail was released at first, there was a lot for people to speculate and eventually set in stone as their expectations. Sadly, the amount of time Blizzard put into making this game worked against them, as people rationalized with themselves that the only reason it was taking so long was because they were trying to make it to suit their exact desires. People wanted gritty graphics, subtle world building, a dark story, all sorts of things that Blizzard had never even hinted at before. When the game was finally released, a lot of people were absolutely flabbergasted that it wasn't exactly what they thought it would be, which inevitably led to disappointment because it never occurred to them that maybe they were reaching too high. During those years of waiting, I wasn't expecting anything specific or even game-changing, I just wanted another good StarCraft game. Perhaps I wasn't as disappointed because I just didn't buy into the hype culture as much. Even though I loved reading articles online and learning whatever I could about this game, I only bothered with the official sources, as I wanted to form my own opinion on it. I pretty much got exactly what I asked for and even more, which is why I love it so much. Only a few games have ever come close to making me question my placing these games as #1 in my heart, and it makes me kind of sad that people can't see the same kind of quality in them. Once again, I have absolutely no problem with people not liking these games, but before you make your judgment, all I ask of you is this. Take away all the hype. Take away the years of build-up, the speculation, the fan theories, take away even the fact that it's a Starcraft title. Just pretend that it's some game you've never even heard of before and you just decide to pick up out of curiosity. Is this game really deserving of so much hate? I don't think so. They've still clearly got a lot of love and care behind them, and even if you still don't like them, it's hard to deny Blizzard not sparing any attention on one of the franchises that got them big. Thanks for watching, and as always, this is the Gaming Cat wishing you all the best of luck. Like Starcraft, like Starcraft, like Starcraft, like Starcraft, like Starcraft, like Starcraft! Oh god, I can't do it. Oh Jesus.